There is an organization in this country that has labeled over 1,500 groups as hate groups. Not the FBI, not a federal court, not a single elected official. A private nonprofit, with no legal authority and no democratic accountability, gets to decide who is dangerous in America. And one of those groups they labeled was attacked. A man was shot in the lobby. SPLC never apologized, never pulled the name. They kept it on the list. Now, for the first time, they are sitting under oath in front of Congress. And what you are about to watch is a congressman forcing them to answer the one question they have avoided for years. Who decides what counts as hate, and who gets to stay off the list?
Texas is recognized.
Thank the chairman and thank the witnesses. I'd like to observe Mr. Panger. We both served in the Office of the Attorney General of the state of Texas. I want to thank you for your service there. Mr. Fair, in 2012, the Family Research Council was attacked and the guard in the front of the building was shot. The head of the Family Research Council, Tony Perkins, made quite note at the time of Southern Poverty Law Center's involvement in that and putting Family Research Council on their so-called hate map. Has the SPLC ever acknowledged that its designation contributed to that attack?
Congressman Roy,
Yes or no?
I can't answer that question with a yes or no. You asked me if I
Did they retract, correct, or reconsider the listing of the Family Research Council on its hate map?
The Family Research Council is listed on our hate map because it meets the criteria.
To this day, you continue to keep the Family Research Council on its hate map. Is that true?
The Family Research Council remains on the hate map because it meets the criteria that we use for—
Which criteria?
The Family Research Council is an anti-LGBTQ.
Okay, so on your website, you used to have language on there defending your position on the Family Research Council, and you had language saying that other groups, like Focus on the Family, are not included, and you use that as your defense. Well, that language is now gone, and Focus on the Family is now noted as a hate group.
Mr. Roy.
Can you explain that?
Congressman Roy, we take no pleasure in listing any group, and we wish the list was empty. But we have the constitutional right to express our opinion.
How many leftist anti-Jewish groups do you have listed on your website? Name them.
Anyone listening to this can go to our website and see our Year in Hate and Extremism report was released this morning.
How many extremist Islamic groups do you have of the 1,500 or so organizations you have on your hate map?
Again, anyone can go to our website.
My office has been looking over it and can't really find one.
Again, it is the SPLC's
You think
right.
SPLC could provide us a list of the Islamic-oriented groups do you have on your hate map?
Mr. Roy, we don't target any group because of its religion.
Really?
I want to be clear about that.
Really?
Yes, that's exactly right. We target no group because of its religion. We target groups because they express statements and engage in activities that demean and vilify.
So you brought up LGBTQ groups a second ago.
Roy.
So you brought up LGBT groups a minute ago. So you think there's a bunch of Islamic groups that are pro-LGBTQ? Is that the position of the SPLC? I just want to make sure the record is reflecting that.
Mr. Roy, as I said, we target no group or label no group because of its religion. We target groups and label groups because of what they say about others. And we have a constitutional right to do that, and we will continue to do that.
How long did it take for you to criticize the attacks on October 7th?
Mr. Roy.
Was it immediate?
We were clear and loud about our criticism of the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th.
My research shows that it took you at least 3 weeks to finally say anything, and then you attacked and criticized Israel.
Mr. Roy.
Do you think the record reflects that, or am I incorrect?
Mr. Roy, as I said, the SPLC has a 55-year history of fighting antisemitism. It speaks for itself.
And yet the response to the targeting the Family Research Council was to defend yourself for having focused on the family, and then you immediately, and you pulled down from the website that defense. It was your only defense.
Well, first, Mr. Roy, speakers in the United States don't need to defend their speech. We have free speech. And so everyone should understand that.
Yeah, you do here on the record have to defend the position of an organization that has now been indicted and has superseding indictment based on very clear indications of the way the money is flowing in order to target very specific groups and to potentially defraud your donors, not to mention, by the way, banks. If I had a little more time, I'd like to have a little bit more conversation about debanking and your engagement with banking. But the last question I'll ask you is, with respect to Charlie Kirk, have you all taken any position since Charlie Kirk
Mr. Roy, we unequivocally condemned the murder of Charlie Kirk.
What about the listing of Charlie Kirk?
It is our position that TPUSA expresses views and vilifies other people based on immutable characteristics, exposing them to our listing.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of unanimous consent requests.
Objection.
I have several documents here. November 2025 Hate Watch from the Southern Poverty Law Center, in which hearing or the work that I've done on Sharia law was included in Hate Watch without objection. Another one here, anti-Muslim bigotry, in which work we did in this very room in the subcommittee on the Constitution highlighting concerns with Sharia law were included in the Hate Watch. I'd like to insert those in the record.
Without objection. Gentleman yields back.
Mr. Chairman, have you see request?
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to enter into the record a letter from the Jewish Council of Public Affairs.
Let me just validate something you probably felt while watching that. That didn't feel like a normal congressional hearing. And you're right, it wasn't. What you just watched was a private organization with no legal authority, no elected officials, and no external oversight sitting under oath in front of Congress for the first time and being asked to defend decisions that have gotten people shot. I want to unpack exactly what happened in that room because three things were going on at once, and most coverage will only show you one of them. The first is the credibility trap the SPLC walked right into. The second is a consistency problem so obvious it's almost hard to believe they tried to defend it. And the third, the one that should concern every American regardless of party, is a structural question about what happens when private organizations start wielding public power. Let me start with context, because you need to understand what the SPLC actually is before you can understand why this hearing mattered. The SPLC was founded in 1971 and spent its first decades doing genuinely important work. They sued Ku Klux Klan chapters into bankruptcy. That history is real, and I'm not dismissing it. But here is the thing about credibility. Once you build it, it becomes a form of power. And power without accountability is the same problem regardless of who holds it or how they got it. The SPLC's hate map today is not just a list on a website. Law enforcement agencies have cited it. Tech platforms have used it to make content moderation decisions. Banks and payment processors have used it to terminate financial relationships with listed organizations. Think about what that means in practice. A private nonprofit with no court order, no due process requirement, no external appeals mechanism can effectively cut an organization off from banking, from platforms, from donors, and from legitimacy. That is not a small amount of power. Now let's talk about what Congressman Roy actually exposed, because the most important moment in that exchange wasn't the loudest one. Roy asked a simple yes or no question. Did the SPLC ever acknowledge that its designation of the Family Research Council contributed to the 2012 attack where a security guard was shot in the lobby? The representative said he couldn't answer yes or no. That is not a legal limitation, that is a choice, and the factual record here is not ambiguous. The shooter told the FBI directly that he used the SPLC's website to identify the Family Research Council as a target. He walked in armed and opened fire. A man named Leo Johnson was shot and stopped him by wrestling the gun away while bleeding. The SPLC condemned the violence and noted the shooter acted alone. They did not remove the Family Research Council from the list. They did not revisit the criteria that put it there. They did not ask publicly whether their platform played any role in what happened. Now, I want to be precise here, because this is where lazy analysis goes wrong. Listing an organization is not the same as pulling a trigger. The SPLC has a First Amendment right to express its opinions. The representative said that in the hearing, and he was legally correct. But legal correctness and moral accountability are not the same thing. If a major media outlet published reporting that a shooter directly cited as the reason he chose a target, we would expect serious internal examination. The SPLC gave a condemnation of the violence and moved on, and that tells you something important about how they view their own accountability. The second thing Roy exposed is what I think is the most structurally damaging issue in the entire hearing: the consistency problem. The SPLC had previously published a defense of its Family Research Council listing that specifically distinguished the group from Focus on the Family, essentially arguing that Focus on the Family did not meet the criteria. That language is now gone from their website. Focus on the Family is now also listed. When Roy pressed the representative on how many Islamic extremist organizations appear on the list, out of roughly 1,500 groups they've designated, the representative declined to provide a number. He said they don't target any group because of its religion. That sounds principled. But here is the question hanging in that room like smoke. Are there genuinely no Islamic organizations in America that publicly demean LGBTQ individuals? Because if the criteria are applied consistently, that would be a very strange result. When the representative wouldn't answer, the silence was louder than anything he said. When criteria expand in one direction and contract in another, and when the organization controls both the criteria and the application with no external review, what you have is not a standard. What you have is a preference dressed up as a standard. Now let's zoom out, because this is the part most coverage will skip entirely. The SPLC's structural problem is not a conservative problem or a liberal problem. It is a power without accountability problem. Here is the mechanism, and I want you to hold on to this because it applies far beyond this one organization. A group builds credibility through legitimate work. That influence means their designations carry real consequences. But there is no external appeals process. There is no independent review board. There is no requirement that criteria be applied consistently across ideological lines. The organization is the prosecutor, the judge, and the jury simultaneously. And if you end up on the list, your only recourse is litigation, which takes years and resources most organizations simply don't have. That is not a system designed to produce accurate outcomes. It is a system designed to produce unchallenged ones. And the person who suffers is not some abstract institution. It is the staff member at a listed organization who can't process payroll because the bank account was frozen. Real people pay the price when accountability systems break down, and they pay it quietly without anyone writing about it. The October 7th exchange deserves a moment too. Roy claimed it took the SPLC at least 3 weeks to respond publicly to the Hamas attack on Israel. The representative flatly denied it. I cannot verify who is correct from the transcript alone, but an organization describing itself as having a 55-year history of fighting antisemitism should have a clear, dated, immediately retrievable public record of its response to the largest anti-Semitic massacre since the Holocaust. If that record is hard to find, the difficulty is its own answer. Here is what I want you to walk away with. This hearing was not really about the Family Research Council. It was not about Focus on the Family, Charlie Kirk, or Turning Point USA. It was about one question every functioning democracy eventually has to answer. What do you do when a private organization starts exercising the kind of power that used to require democratic accountability? What are the limits? Who enforces them? And what happens to the people caught in the middle when no one does? The SPLC built something real over 50 years. But the same institution that fought for accountability in the 1970s is now resisting it in the 2020s. That is not a partisan observation. That is just what power does when the oversight disappears. The fact that Congress had to hold a hearing at all to ask these questions tells you that for a very long time, no one was asking them. And that ends up being a problem for everyone, not just the groups on the list. If this matters to you, share it with someone who still thinks these institutions are self-correcting. Subscribe for more breakdowns that go past the politics and into the mechanics of how power actually works. Because the hearings that quietly reshape institutions are almost never the ones that make the front page. And this was one of them.